The fluorescent lights in OR3 had just clicked off when my phone buzzed with a text from Owen. "Dinner at my parents' Saturday. You said you'd come, don't bail on me." I pulled off my surgical cap and leaned against the scrub sink, smiling at the screen. 2 months of dating Owen Mercer, and he still got nervous before family things. It was one of the things I loved about him, this careful, considerate man who ran a clean energy consulting firm and sent me good morning texts every single day without fail, who somehow made my chaotic schedule feel manageable just by existing steadily beside it. "I'll be there," I typed back. "Stop worrying." His response came in seconds. "I'm not worried. I'm strategically anxious." I laughed out loud in the empty scrub room. He called me 10 minutes later while I was walking to my car. "Okay, there's one thing I should mention before Saturday." His voice had an odd quality to it. Not nervous exactly, but careful in a way he usually wasn't. "Should I be worried? No, maybe?" A pause. "My brother Calloway will be there." "You have a brother?" "A twin, actually." Another pause, longer. "We don't talk about him much. He runs the other side of the family's financial interests. The side I left when I was 22. I unlocked my car and sat in the driver's seat without starting it. The parking garage hummed around me. "Different how?" I asked carefully. "Identical, physically. 2 minutes older than me, which he's never once let me forget." Owen laughed, but there wasn't much warmth in it. In every other way, completely different. I got out. He stayed in and built something I don't entirely understand and don't want to. "What kind of something?" "Private equity, technically. On paper," he exhaled. "Just be careful around him, Nadia. He's not like me." The warning sent a small chill through me. Owen didn't say things like that lightly. Any other surprises I should know about? We talked for another 20 minutes. Him walking me through the family, his mother, Constance, a former federal judge who'd built her retirement around hosting elaborate dinners, his father, Leonard, retired pharmaceutical exec, who asked pointed questions about career trajectory, the way other fathers asked about the weather, his younger sister Bex, a documentary filmmaker who called from whatever country she was currently embedded in. After we hung up, I sat in my car a few minutes longer. I'd survived 3 years of surgical residency. I'd told families their loved ones weren't coming home. I could handle a dinner party. But an identical twin who ran money in ways Owen didn't want to explain, that was a different kind of pressure. Saturday arrived before I was ready. I changed 3 times, settled on a dark teal wrap dress, professional but not stiff, the kind of thing that said I'm a person with a life outside this dinner without trying to prove it. Owen picked me up at 6, looking handsome and clearly fighting nerves. He kissed my cheek, told me I looked beautiful, held my hand the whole drive out to Westchester. The Mercer house was exactly what I'd pictured, and also somehow more. A Georgian colonial set back from the road on 2 acres, the kind of understated wealth that announced itself through what it didn't bother to show off. Owen had grown up here. I kept trying to imagine him small in these rooms. Constance Mercer met us at the door. Mid-60s, silver-streaked hair pinned back, sharp eyes that took me apart and reassembled me in under 2 seconds. Her smile, when it came, was genuine. "Nadia." She took both my hands. "Owen's told us so much about you. An ER attending at 31. That's not easy to pull off." "I had excellent attendings who terrified me into competence," I said, and she laughed, a real one. Leonard appeared at her shoulder, equally sharp, slightly warmer. He shook my hand and immediately asked what I thought about the proposed changes to Medicare reimbursement rates, which was either a test or genuine curiosity. I gave him a real answer. His eyebrows lifted slightly, approvingly. Bex had zoomed in from Nairobi, and her face was on a laptop propped against a fruit bowl on the kitchen counter. She looked exactly like Owen, same dark eyes, same dimple on the left side, and she spent 4 minutes giving me a completely unsolicited and very thorough assessment of her brother's flaws before Constance closed the laptop lid. "She does that to everyone," Owen whispered. "I liked her," I whispered back. We were still laughing when Constance said, "We're just waiting on Calloway. He called ahead this time at least." Owen's hand found mine under the counter. I squeezed back. I heard him before the door opened. Footsteps in the mudroom, unhurried, deliberate. The particular quality of someone who moves through space like it already belongs to them. Then he stepped into the kitchen doorway, and every coherent thought I had dissolved. Owen had said they were identical. He hadn't said it would feel like a glitch in reality. Same face, same dark eyes, same height. But where Owen wore his looks with a kind of easy warmth, like he was glad to be recognized, glad to be known, this man wore his like a closed door, beautiful and impenetrable. He had on a charcoal wool blazer over a black shirt, no tie, and he carried himself with the particular stillness of someone who has spent years learning that patience is a weapon. His eyes swept the room, tagged everyone, landed on me. I don't know why I moved. Later I'd tell myself it was the parallel. 2 months of greeting Owen when he walked through a door, my body operating on muscle memory. Later I'd tell myself it was the lighting, the way they were identical at a distance, the way my brain simply didn't catch up in time. Whatever the reason, I stepped forward, lifted my hand to touch his arm in greeting, the way I would have with Owen, said his name, or what I thought was his name. The man in the doorway turned toward me with the patience of someone who'd been waiting, and because I was already in motion, because I was already leaning in to say hello the way you do with someone you know, my lips grazed the corner of his mouth. Not a real kiss, less than a second, a glancing, mortifying accident. I jerked back. The room had gone absolutely silent. Calloway's expression hadn't changed. Not shock, not offense. Something else, a careful, measured attention that made my face go hot from the inside out. "Wrong, brother," he said. His voice was lower than Owen's, with an unhurried quality that suggested he found most things mildly interesting rather than surprising. "But I'll admit that's a new one. I'm so sorry." My hand was over my mouth. "I saw you come in and I thought, you look exactly identical," Owen said, appearing at my side with his hand on my elbow. "Calloway, this is Nadia." "Nadia, this is my brother, who should have been introduced properly before now. Calloway Mercer." He extended his hand. His grip was precise, warm, and he held it exactly 1 beat longer than necessary before releasing. "It's a pleasure. I hope the greeting doesn't get less enthusiastic from here." I shook his hand because refusing would have been worse. Then I sank into the nearest chair and wished briefly for the ability to dematerialize. "Truly, I'm mortified," I managed. "I don't usually walk up to strangers and—" "You thought I was Owen," he said simply, taking the seat directly across from me, which I suspected even then was not an accident. "It's an understandable mistake. We've been confusing people since 1993. There was something in his tone. Not quite amusement, not quite warmth. Something more precise than either. His dark eyes stayed on my face with an attention that felt clinical, and also like the opposite of clinical. "Calloway," Constance said from the stove, without turning around. "Stop looking at her like that." "Like what?" "Like she's a problem you're trying to categorize." "I'm listening to her heart rate return to normal," he said mildly. "It's practically back to baseline. She has excellent recovery." "She's a doctor," Owen said. "She probably regulates better than most." Occupational advantage. Calloway's attention didn't waver from my face. "What's your specialty?" "Emergency medicine." I held his gaze, because looking away felt like losing something. "You private capital," a pause. "Less glamorous than yours, but the hours are better." Dinner was loud and layered in the way Owen had described. Multiple conversations weaving through each other. Food passed around with constant commentary. Leonard asking questions that sounded like casual conversation, but were clearly something more structured. Constance kept refilling my glass before it was empty, and Calloway sat across from me, contributing little, noticing everything. He spoke twice during the main course. Once to correct something Leonard said about a bond market trend, without looking up from his plate. Once to say, quietly, when Constance made a comment about Owen always being the careful one, "Careful is one word for it." Owen's jaw tightened. I caught it. After dessert, a legitimately excellent lemon tart, Owen gave me a tour of the house while his parents retreated to the sitting room. We walked through rooms full of family photographs and books arranged by color. And Owen put his arm around me and pointed out the window, where he'd broken a pane with a baseball when he was 9, and it should have been easy and grounding. But something had shifted. Something I couldn't name had lodged itself in my awareness, small and persistent and unwelcome. "He was watching you all night," Owen said as we stood at the end of the upstairs hallway. "He's perceptive. Some people are like that, not like that." Owen was quiet for a moment. Calloway doesn't pay attention to people unless he's already decided they matter somehow, and he never decides quickly. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said, I accidentally kissed your brother. I don't think it means anything. Owen nodded, but his hand, when he took mine, held on a little tighter than usual. The goodbyes were warm. Constance hugged me and said I was welcome back any time, which felt like an invitation and a statement simultaneously. Leonard gave me a firm handshake and said Owen had good taste. And Calloway, standing slightly apart from the cluster near the door, watched me with that same unhurried attention. It was nice to meet you, I said, because manners demanded it. And you. He took my hand, and that same strange current moved through the contact. I expect I'll see you again soon, Nadia. He said my name like he'd already been saying it for years. In the car, Owen was quiet for a long time. He liked you, he said finally. He barely talked, that's how I know. Owen kept his eyes on the road. Calloway goes silent when something genuinely interests him. Usually he's managing the room, controlling what gets said. Tonight he just listened, watched. I stared out the passenger window at the highway lights. Don't let him pull you in, Owen said quietly. He doesn't mean to do it. It's just what he does. He's magnetic in a way it's hard to explain until you're already in the middle of it. I told him everything was fine. Told him I was completely focused on us. That wasn't entirely true, and I think we both knew it. The ER is a good place to not think about things. 12-hour shifts in a Level I trauma center don't leave a lot of room for personal preoccupation. For the next week, I worked and slept and worked again and told myself the dinner had been a blip, a strange evening that would fade. Then my friend and colleague Priya cornered me on a Thursday afternoon in the break room. One look at my face and said, "You've been somewhere else all week, Spill." I told her about the dinner. The identical twins. The accidental almost kiss. The way Calloway Mercer sat across a table and looked at me like I was a puzzle he'd already committed to solving. Priya's eyes went wide. "He's the private equity one, as in Calloway Capital? I don't know what it's called." Nadia. She set down her coffee. Calloway Capital manages like $8 billion in assets. He restructured the financing on half the hospital networks in the Northeast. I looked at her. "He's in our world," she said. "Adjacent. He funds healthcare systems," which meant this wasn't just an awkward family dinner. It was a connection that ran straight through my professional life. "What are you going to do?" Priya asked. "Nothing," I said. "Owen is good. Owen is kind and stable, and exactly what I've been trying to build toward." "Trying to build toward," she repeated. "That's an interesting way to put it." I didn't have a good answer to that. 2 weeks later, Constance Mercer called and invited me to what she described as a small family lunch. Her emphasis, her slight pause before the word small, that told me she already knew the situation was complicated and was choosing warmth over pretense. I went. Calloway was already there when Owen and I arrived, standing at the window with a glass of sparkling water, dressed in dark slacks and a gray shirt. He turned when we walked in, and our eyes met across the living room with the same electric jolt as the first time. "Nadia," he said, and somehow he made it sound like he'd been waiting. "Calloway," I said, and kept my voice even. Lunch was smaller and quieter than the first dinner. Leonard asked Owen about a client presentation. Constance told a story about her years on the federal bench that had all of us leaning in, and Calloway sat at the end of the table and said almost nothing, until Leonard made an offhand comment about Owen's consulting firm, struggling with a particular city contract. "It's not struggling," Owen said too quickly. "I didn't say struggling." Leonard looked mildly puzzled. I said navigating. "There's bureaucratic friction on the city side," Calloway said, setting down his water glass. "Owen's team is doing the right thing. These timelines are normal for municipal clean energy projects." Owen looked at his brother. Something passed between them, complicated and old and not entirely resolved. "Thank you," Owen said finally. "I'm stating a fact," Calloway said. After lunch, Owen went with Leonard to look at something in the garage. Constance disappeared into the kitchen, murmuring something about coffee, which left me in the sitting room with Calloway. I should have followed Constance. I didn't. "You're not avoiding me," Calloway said. He settled into the chair across mine with the ease of someone who has never once in his life been uncertain about whether he was welcome. "I expected you to. I considered it," I said honestly. "What changed your mind? I'm not actually good at running from things." I met his gaze. "I become a doctor in an ER. You can't run from things there. It doesn't help." "No." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite surprise, not quite warmth, but something adjacent to both. I imagine not. A silence that didn't feel like silence. You've been thinking about the dinner, he said. Not a question. I accidentally kissed you in front of your brother and your parents, I said. Of course, I've been thinking about it. That's not what I mean. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and there was something in his attention that made the room feel smaller. You've been thinking about the rest of it, the part that came after. You don't know what I've been thinking. No, he agreed. But you're still here. You didn't make an excuse to leave when Owen went with my father. You're sitting across from me in an empty room, and you haven't looked away once. I wanted to say something dismissive. Something that would reset the temperature of the conversation to something manageable. What I said was, I'm with Owen. I know you are. He said it simply, without apology. He's a good man, genuinely. I mean that. He said you were competitive. He's right. We have been for most of our lives. Calloway's gaze didn't waver. But this isn't competition, Nadia. This is something else. What is it? He was quiet for a moment, long enough that I started to think he wasn't going to answer. When you walked in that first night, he said, you looked at me the way people look at something they weren't expecting. Not alarmed, just recalibrating. The corner of his mouth moved. And then you kissed me, which is honestly the best opening line anyone has ever given me, whether or not it was intentional. It wasn't, I said. At all, I know. That's almost the more interesting part. Footsteps in the hallway. Constance with the coffee. Calloway settled back in his chair, and the room returned to its normal dimensions. But he held my gaze for exactly 1 extra second before turning toward his mother. Think about it, that second said. I thought about it. For 3 weeks. I deleted 2 texts from an unknown number, both from him, obviously, because I hadn't given him my number and had no idea how he'd gotten it, though I could guess. The first said only, I'm patient. Take the time you need. The second, but I'm not going anywhere. I deleted them. Both times I stared at my phone for a full minute after. The thing about working in emergency medicine is that you spend a lot of time in moral clarity. In the ER, you don't get to hedge. You decide, and you act, and you live with the outcome. You don't get to wish you'd chosen differently when someone is bleeding on your table. I kept applying that logic to Calloway Mercer and kept coming up short, because the logic said you're with Owen. You care about Owen. Owen is real and good and present. And the logic was right. But there was something underneath the logic that wouldn't quiet down. And I'd been an ER doctor long enough to know that the things you ignore don't go away. They just show up later in worse shape. Priya staged an intervention on a Tuesday, showing up at my apartment with Thai food and 0 patience for vagueness. You look terrible, she announced, setting containers on my counter. And I mean that as a clinical assessment. When did you last sleep more than 5 hours? I'm sleeping fine. You're lying to your best friend who has watched you lie to patients about how a procedure is going to feel. She pointed a fork at me. The difference is I'm not going to be nice about it. I told her everything, the texts, the sitting room, the way Calloway said my name like he'd already decided something. Here's what I think, Priya said. I think you've been in love with Owen the way you love a very well-organized apartment. It's good. It works. You appreciate it every day. But you're not in it. That's not. And I think the first time Calloway Mercer looked at you, you felt something you haven't felt in a long time, and it scared you so badly you've been performing normalcy ever since. I stabbed at a noodle. Owen deserves better than being someone's second choice, she said more gently, and so do you. The following Saturday, Owen and I were supposed to have dinner, just the 2 of us. He called at 4 to cancel. A client situation, apologetic and genuine, and I sat in my apartment with the silence, and I finally stopped arguing with myself. I texted Calloway, we need to talk. His response came in 90 seconds. Name the time and place. My place tonight, 8 o'clock, I'll be there. He showed up 7 minutes early, which told me something. He was wearing jeans and a dark green Henley, no blazer, no armor. He looked almost like Owen, which still hit me the same strange way every time, like seeing a familiar word in a different language. Same letters, different weight. Thank you for coming, I said, and he stepped inside and looked around my apartment the way he looked at everything. Attentive, cataloging, not judgmental. Nice place, he said. Functionally organized. Art you actually chose. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. The corner of his mouth moved. Yes. I poured us both water because I didn't want wine in this conversation. Didn't want anything that might make my thinking softer than it needed to be. Owen thinks you're competitive, I said, sitting on the couch. That you see something he has and you want it. I know he thinks that. Calloway sat in the chair across from me. The same configuration as the sitting room, I realized. Owen and I have a complicated history. He spent a long time in my shadow and resents it, which is fair. I spent a long time not noticing, which is also fair criticism. He looked at me steadily. But this isn't about Owen. Then what is it about? You, simple and direct. You specifically. Not because you're his, not because I can't stand for him to have something I don't. I'm 36 years old and I'm past that. Because you walked into my parents' kitchen and kissed me by mistake, and then looked at me like you already knew you'd made a wrong turn somewhere, but weren't entirely sure you wanted to correct it. That's a generous interpretation of what was actually just embarrassment. Is it? He leaned forward. You've deleted 2 texts from me in 3 weeks, which means you read them first. Which means you've been thinking about this every bit as much as I have. I didn't deny it. Tell me you're in love with Owen, he said quietly. That what you have is real and complete, and you don't spend any part of your day wondering about this. Tell me that, and I'll leave right now, and I'll make it easy. I won't come to dinners. I'll give you the distance. I looked at him. Really looked. The dark eyes with their too careful attention. The way he held himself like someone used to waiting, not impatiently, but with genuine purpose. I care about Owen, I said. I know you do. He's been nothing but kind to me. I know that too. And I can't, my voice caught. I can't be the person who does this to him, who sits across a table from his brother and feels. I stopped. Feels what? His voice was quiet. Like I've been reading the wrong chapter, I said. For weeks. Silence. The particular kind that means something has been said that can't be unsaid. Nadia. He stood, moved toward the couch and sat beside me, close but not touching, which somehow made it more careful, not less. I'm not asking you to hurt anyone. I'm asking you to stop pretending. You don't know what I'm pretending. You run an emergency department, he said. You make decisions under pressure that most people can't even imagine. You're not confused about what you feel. You're afraid of what it costs. He wasn't wrong. I looked at the window, the city outside, ordinary and ongoing. If I end things with Owen, I said, it's going to be bad. He'll think you manipulated this. Maybe. Calloway didn't look away. Or maybe he'll eventually understand that I'm not what I took something from him. That you made a choice on your own. He won't see it that way. Not at first. No, he agreed. Not at first. Another silence. I was aware of the precise distance between us, of how easy it would be to close it, of how much closing it would change. I need to tell Owen myself, I said. Face to face. He deserves that. Yes, Calloway said immediately. He does. And I need you to understand something. I turned to look at him directly. I'm not choosing you because you're exciting or dangerous, or whatever the narrative is supposed to be. I'm choosing you because when you look at me, I feel like I'm being seen. Accurately. Without the softening. His expression shifted. Something moving through it, briefly unguarded. I see you, he said, and it wasn't a line. It was a statement. I went to Owen's office Monday morning. His assistant knew me and waved me through, and Owen looked up from his desk with an that told me he'd been exhibiting for longer than I'd known to have it. Hey. His voice was careful. Hey, I sat. I'm sorry, Owen. You've been exactly what you said you were the whole time. That's not nothing. But, he said, but I can't be with you when I feel something for your brother. That's not fair to either of us. He was quiet. He turned toward the window, the harbor visible from his third-floor view, gray and silver in the November light. I knew, he said finally, from the dinner, when you came back from the tour and you had that look. I knew something had shifted, Owen. I'm not angry at you. His voice was careful, controlled in the way of someone holding a lot of shape. I'm not even sure I'm angry at Calloway. I'm just tired of being the one who loses the comparison. He turned back to me. That's not on you. That's something I need to work out. You're not. Don't, he said, not unkindly. Don't tell me I'm great and someone will see that. I know I'm great. That's not actually the helpful part right now. I nodded. Take care of yourself, he said. And Nadia, if he's not what you think he is, if this turns into something you didn't anticipate, he stopped. I won't say I'll be here. That's not something I can promise. But I hope it's worth it. I left his office with tears I didn't let fall until I was in the elevator. Then I let them fall, briefly, for the relationship I'd chosen to close, and for the good man inside it who deserved to be someone's first choice. Calloway was waiting on the street, just there, leaning against his car, watching the door I'd come out of. When he saw my face, he pushed off the hood and walked toward me and didn't say anything, just put his arms around me, right there on the sidewalk, warm and certain. "I've got you," he said into my hair. I held on, let myself feel the weight of the choice I'd made, and the strange, terrifying relief underneath it. The fallout was quieter than I expected, and also louder in specific ways. The medical community is smaller than people think, and Calloway's work touched enough hospital networks that our relationship surfaced in professional gossip within a month. There were raised eyebrows, a colleague who made a comment about career-adjacent relationships that I shut down politely but firmly. An uncomfortable conversation with my department chief that resolved itself when she realized Calloway was scrupulous about keeping his firm's hospital investments at arm's length from anything involving me. He was protective in ways that sometimes ran ahead of what I needed. When a board member made a snide comment at a fundraiser about physicians and private equity, Calloway had a quiet conversation with the man that apparently resulted in a rather extensive apology. I told him he couldn't do things like that. "Watch me," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "Calloway, you're mine," he said. "Anyone who comes for you is making a decision about what they're willing to lose. That's slightly terrifying. It's a business principle." He looked up. "I apply it everywhere. I'm not a portfolio asset." "No," he said, and his voice shifted to something more honest. "You're considerably more important than that." Owen, meanwhile, was cold at the family dinners, which resumed awkwardly, because Constance Mercer refused to let the situation fracture her household. He was civil in the way that's harder to tolerate than anger. But he came. Every Sunday he came, and he sat through it, and that took more grace than I had words for. 3 months in, I was leaving a late shift when nausea stopped me cold at the ambulance bay doors. I'd been tired, distracted. My last cycle was, I counted backward on my way to my car and sat very still in the parking garage. Priya found me 20 minutes later, still in the front seat. "Nadia." She knocked on the window. I rolled it down. "How late?" she said. 6 weeks, maybe 7. She drove me to a pharmacy without another word. We sat in the back booth of a diner afterward, 2 positive tests on the table between us. "Options," Priya said. "You have real options here, I know," I said. And I did know. I was 31 years old and a physician, and I understood exactly what options meant. "I'm keeping it." Priya nodded. "Then we call Calloway." "Not yet." I pressed my hands flat on the diner table. "I need a few hours. I need to figure out what I want to say." I called him that night from my apartment, because some conversations shouldn't happen in person before you've found the words. "I'm pregnant," I said. Silence. The kind that has texture. "Say that again," he said quietly. 6 or 7 weeks. I took 3 tests. More silence. I sat on my couch with my phone pressed to my ear and listened to him breathe. "I want to come over," he said. "Okay." He was there in 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. He let himself in with the key I'd given him 2 weeks earlier and crossed the apartment and sat beside me and took my hands. Both of them careful. "Tell me what you're thinking," he said. "I'm keeping it," I said. "I already decided." "If you don't want," he kissed me. Brief but thorough, the way he did when he was trying to communicate something he didn't have the right words for yet. "I want this," he said when he pulled back. His voice was rough in a way I hadn't heard before. "I want you. I want all of it. The mess of it." "Is that clear enough?" "Surprisingly, yes." He exhaled. "Now, you're going to let me handle the practical pieces without arguing about every single one. That is absolutely not going to happen. Nadia, Calloway." I looked at him steadily. "I'm an emergency physician. I'm good at high-pressure logistics. You don't get to take over my life just because you're panicking. I'm not panicking. You have the energy of someone panicking very quietly." His expression shifted, something moving through it, trying to hold back, and then not holding back. He laughed. A real one, surprised out of him. "Okay," he said. "We do this together. Together," I agreed. We told his family the following Sunday. Constance cried, which she'd have denied under oath. Leonard shook Calloway's hand with an expression that mixed calculation and genuine emotion in roughly equal parts. Bex zoomed in from wherever she was and yelled something that got cut off when the connection dropped, and Owen sat with his coffee cup and looked at the table for a long moment. Then he looked up. "Congratulations," he said. He said to me, not to Calloway. Genuinely. He left shortly after, but he said it. The baby came 6 days before her due date, on a Wednesday afternoon in March, which was, if you asked Calloway, exactly the optimal time for maximum controlled chaos. Labor was fast and overwhelming, and Calloway, who handled multi-million-dollar crises with an expression like a man reading a newspaper, came completely apart. "Give her something," he told the resident. "She's in pain. Can we?" "I'm fine," I said through gritted teeth. "This is normal. This is not. She's a physician. She knows her own thresholds. Can we just—" "Calloway." I found his hand, gripped it. "I need you here, present. Can you do that?" He went quiet, breathed. When our daughter arrived, furious and loud and more herself already than I would have thought possible for someone so new, he made a sound I had never heard from him, low, involuntary. Like something he'd been holding for a very long time had finally let go. "Hi," I said to her, when they put her in my arms. She had dark hair in his jawline, and I was told my nose, though I couldn't quite see it yet. "Hi, you. We've been waiting." Calloway touched her hand with a gentleness that made my chest ache. "Josephine," he said. "We'd agreed on the name weeks ago, his grandmother's." "Jo, for short, unless she decides something else suits her better," said. "She will," he said, watching her. "She's already arguing." She was, in fact, still yelling. 2 days later, Owen came to the hospital. He brought a small stuffed bear, gray, carefully chosen, and stood in the doorway of the room, looking like he wasn't sure he was supposed to be there. "You don't have to," I said. "I wanted to." He came in, looked at Jo, sleeping in the hospital bassinet. "She looks like both of you somehow. People keep saying that." He was quiet for a moment. "I owe you something," he said, not looking at me. "An apology, maybe. I spent a few months being angry at you for making a choice instead of understanding that the choice was honest. That took me longer than it should have. Owen, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. She deserves an uncle who isn't carrying a grudge." He looked at Jo. "Hey," he said softly. "I'm Owen. I'm the better organized brother, regardless of what you hear." I laughed, which surprised both of us. He stayed for 30 minutes. When he left, he shook Calloway's hand in the hallway, and I couldn't hear what they said. But when Calloway came back in, something in his posture was lighter. "He said she looks like a Mercer," Calloway said. "She does," I said. "So do you, for what it's worth." He sat beside me, took my hand. "What does that mean? For what it's worth?" "It means you're stuck with me," I said, "and with her, and with the part where I will never stop having opinions about everything, including whatever decisions you make about hospital financing." "I look forward to the conflict of interest," he said. "You would." He raised my hand and pressed his lips to the back of it, and I watched him watching our daughter, and I thought about a night 10 months ago, when I'd walked into his parents' kitchen and made the most embarrassing mistake of my adult life, and how it had turned out to be the most important moment in my adult life. Sometimes the wrong turn is the right one. You only see it from the other end, looking back at everything you almost didn't choose, thinking, "There it is, that was the door. I'm glad I walked through it, even sideways, even by accident, even into the wrong brother."